The doorbell rang at precisely 6:30 on Thanksgiving evening. I was carving the turkey when my phone buzzed with a text message from my daughter Rebecca. "Dad, can you come get me? I'm at the house. It's an emergency." My hands stopped mid-slice. Rebecca lived 20 minutes away in Edina with her husband Derek and my 2 grandchildren, Lily and Noah. They were supposed to be hosting their own Thanksgiving dinner tonight. I wiped my hands on my apron and called her immediately. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and when she did, her voice was shaking. Not from emotion, but from cold. "Dad, I need you to come now. Derek locked me out of the house." "What do you mean he locked you out? It's 23 degrees outside." "I know." Her teeth were chattering. "Please just come." "I can't explain over the phone. I'm standing in the backyard by the fence. The neighbors might see me if I go to the front." I grabbed my coat and keys, my heart hammering against my ribs as I drove through the dark Minneapolis streets. The houses I passed glowed with warmth, families visible through windows, gathered around tables laden with food. Every lit window felt like an accusation. When I pulled up to 847 Oakwood Drive, the house Rebecca and Derek had bought 5 years ago with my help on the down payment, I didn't see my daughter anywhere. The front windows blazed with light. I could hear music playing inside, see shadows moving behind the curtains. A Thanksgiving celebration in full swing. I walked around to the backyard gate and found Rebecca huddled against the fence in nothing but a thin cardigan over her dress. Her lips had a bluish tint, and her whole body trembled violently. "Oh, Becca." I stripped off my heavy winter coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "How long have you been out here?" "An hour. Maybe more." She couldn't stop shaking. I lost track of time. I guided her to my car, cranking the heat to maximum. She held her hands against the vents, wincing as feeling returned to her fingers. Through the rear window of the house, I could see Derek moving around the kitchen. My 8-year-old granddaughter Lily appeared briefly in an upstairs window before the curtains closed. "Tell me what happened." Rebecca stared straight ahead, her expression hollow. "We were getting ready for dinner. His mother Diane was coming over, and everything had to be perfect. You know how Derek gets about impressing his mother." I knew. Derek Palmer had always been concerned with appearances, with presenting the right image to the right people. In the 10 years he'd been married to my daughter, I'd watched him perform the role of devoted husband and father while systematically isolating Rebecca from anyone who might question his control. "I asked if we could invite you for dessert," Rebecca continued. "Just for an hour. I know you made other plans, but I thought it would be nice for the kids to see their grandfather on Thanksgiving." "What did he say?" "He said no. Said it was his mother's holiday with us, and having you there would complicate the dynamic." Her voice cracked. I pushed back. "Dad." I actually pushed back for once. I said, "You're my father and you should be welcome in our home." "Good for you, sweetheart." He told me if I wanted you here so badly, I could spend Thanksgiving outside waiting for you. She looked at me with eyes that reminded me painfully of my late wife Maggie. And then he locked the doors. I sat in my idling car, staring at my daughter's house where my grandchildren were eating Thanksgiving dinner while their mother had been locked outside like an unwanted animal. The rage that filled my chest was unlike anything I'd felt since Maggie's death 3 years ago. It was hot and sharp and righteous. "Did you call the police?" "And say what?" "That my husband locked me out of my own house?" Rebecca laughed bitterly. "It's his house too, Dad. We both own it. He'd just say it was a misunderstanding, that I stormed out during an argument. You know how charming he can be." I did know. Derek Palmer had charm in abundance when he needed it. He was the kind of man who could convince anyone of anything, who never raised his voice in public but ruled his home with quiet, absolute control. "What about the neighbors? Surely someone saw you out there." Mrs. Chen next door knocked on her window and waved at me. Rebecca pulled my coat tighter around herself. But what was I supposed to do? Stand there and shout that my husband locked me out? Humiliate myself in front of the whole neighborhood? Derek would make me pay for that later. The casual way she said it, the acceptance in her voice that there would be punishment for embarrassing him, made my blood run cold. How long has this been going on, Becca? She was quiet for a long moment, her breath fogging the windshield. You remember when Maggie died? When Mom's funeral was over and everyone went home? Of course I remember. Worst day of my life. Derek told me I'd grieved enough. That I needed to pull myself together for the sake of the children. This was 3 days after we buried her, Dad. 3 days. And when I couldn't stop crying, when I couldn't just turn it off like a faucet, he started sleeping in the guest room. Said my emotional instability was affecting his sleep and his work performance. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Maggie would have known what to do. She'd been a nurse for 30 years, had an instinct for spotting when something was wrong. She'd expressed concerns about Derek before she died, little comments I'd dismissed as overprotective mother anxiety. Roy, she'd said to me once, using my given name the way she only did when something was serious, watch how Derek talks to Rebecca when he thinks nobody's paying attention. Watch how she changes when he walks into a room. I hadn't watched closely enough. I'd been too consumed by my own grief, too grateful that Derek was there to help Rebecca through her mother's death. Too blind to see that he was using my grief and my absence to tighten his grip on my daughter's life. There's more, isn't there? I asked quietly. Rebecca nodded, tears finally spilling down her cold reddened cheeks. The teacher's salary I make? He takes it all. Deposits it into a joint account I don't have access to. Gives me an allowance for groceries and household expenses. I have to show him receipts for everything. That's financial abuse, Becca. He calls it budget management. Says I'm not good with money, that someone needs to make sure we stay financially stable. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of my coat. And maybe he's right. Maybe I am bad with money. Maybe I do need him to manage everything. This was how it worked, I realized. Derek had spent years convincing my daughter that she was incompetent, that she needed his control, that any suffering she endured was somehow her own fault. And I'd been too wrapped up in my own life, my own loss, to notice. Listen to me. I turned to face Rebecca fully. Your mother was the smartest woman I ever knew. She saw something in Derek that worried her, and I should have listened. I should have protected you better. Dad, it's not your fault. Maybe not. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to let this continue. Through the rear window of the house, I could see Derek bringing a platter to the dining room table. He was laughing, animated, playing the role of gracious host. My granddaughter Lily was setting out plates. My grandson Noah was too small to see, but I knew he was in there somewhere, learning from his father's example what it meant to be a man. What are you going to do? Rebecca asked, fear creeping into her voice. Please don't confront him. It'll only make things worse. I'm not going to confront him. Not yet. I started the car and pulled away from Oakwood Drive. But I'm not taking you back there tonight either. Where are we going? My apartment. You're going to get warm, eat some dinner, and tomorrow we're going to talk to someone I know. Someone who can help. Derek will be furious when he realizes I'm not coming back tonight. Let him be furious. I glanced at my daughter, still shivering despite the heat blasting from the vents. He locked you outside in freezing weather on Thanksgiving while he celebrated with his mother and your children. Whatever fury he's feeling, he earned it. As we drove through the dark streets of Minneapolis toward my small apartment at Maplewood Senior Living, I thought about Maggie. About the warnings she tried to give me that I'd been too stubborn or too naive to hear. About how she'd made me promise, near the end, to take care of Rebecca and the grandchildren. I'm sorry, Maggie, I said silently. I should have seen this sooner. But I was seeing it now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And Derek Palmer was about to learn that his mild-mannered, retired schoolteacher father-in-law was not the pushover he'd assumed. I'd spent 40 years teaching American history, including entire units on revolution, resistance, and what happens when good people finally decide they've had enough of tyranny. Derek had declared war the moment he locked my daughter outside in the cold. He just didn't know it yet. Tomorrow morning, I would make a phone call that would start the process of getting Rebecca and my grandchildren away from him. But tonight, I would feed my daughter, wrap her in warm blankets, and let her sleep in safety for the first time in longer than I wanted to imagine. The temperature outside had dropped to 19 degrees. Inside my car, Rebecca had finally stopped shaking. She leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes, exhausted by cold and fear and years of walking on eggshells in her own home. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me, sweetheart. I'm your father. Protecting you is what I'm supposed to do." What I didn't say, what I couldn't say yet, was that protection was only the first step. What came next would require strategy, patience, and the kind of calculated action that Derek Palmer would never see coming from a 71-year-old retired teacher. But it was coming. As surely as winter had descended on Minneapolis, justice was coming to 847, Oakwood Drive. Rebecca slept until almost noon the next day, curled under 3 blankets on my pull-out sofa. I sat in my recliner watching her breathe, the way I used to when she was a baby and Maggie and I were new parents terrified something might go wrong in the night. Now she was 38 years old and I was still watching her breathe, still terrified, but for entirely different reasons. When she finally stirred, I had coffee ready and scrambled eggs warming on the stove. She sat up slowly, wincing as she moved. Her fingers were bandaged where I'd treated the frostbite the night before. Nothing severe, but enough to remind us both how close she'd come to real harm. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck." She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping both hands around the mug. "Has Derek called?" 17 times. Plus 9 text messages. I handed her my phone so she could see the notifications. All variations on the same theme. "Where is she? She needs to come home immediately, this is unacceptable behavior." Rebecca stared at the messages with an expression I couldn't quite read. Part fear, part resignation, part something else. "He's going to be so angry." "Let him be angry." I sat down across from her with my own coffee. "Becca, I need you to tell me everything. Not just about last night. Everything that's been happening in that house." She was quiet for a long time, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her mug. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. It started small. Comments about how I dressed, suggestions about what I should eat. He said he was just trying to help me be my best self. She paused. "After Lily was born, I gained weight. Not much, maybe 20 pounds I couldn't lose. Derek started making jokes about it in front of his friends. Little digs about my body, always followed by laughter so I couldn't get upset without seeming like I had no sense of humor. I felt my jaw tighten but said nothing, letting her continue. Then it was about my teaching. He'd say things like, "Must be nice to have such an easy job with summers off." Never mind that I spent every evening grading papers and every weekend planning lessons. He made it sound like I was lazy, like I was getting a free ride while he did all the real work. He's a commercial real estate broker. I tried to keep my voice neutral. That's not exactly saving lives. Rebecca almost smiled. That's what Mom used to say. She'd tell me not to let him diminish what I do, that teaching is one of the most important jobs there is. But after she died, there was nobody to remind me of that anymore. Just Derek, telling me over and over that I wasn't contributing enough, wasn't trying hard enough, wasn't good enough. Financial control came next, she explained. It happened gradually, so smoothly she barely noticed until it was complete. First, he suggested combining their accounts to simplify budgeting. Then he took over paying all the bills because she was too busy with work and the kids. Then he set up a system where her paychecks went directly into an account only he could access. He gives me $300 every 2 weeks for groceries and household items. I have to save every receipt. If I go over budget, he makes me explain why. If I buy something he considers frivolous, even something small like a magazine or a coffee, he lectures me about financial responsibility. That's not a marriage, Becca. That's imprisonment. She looked at me with tired eyes. Is it though? He never hits me. He provides for us. The house is nice, the kids have everything they need. Maybe I'm just being ungrateful. This was the insidious part, I realized. Derek had convinced her that emotional and financial abuse weren't really abuse at all. That her suffering was normal, acceptable, even deserved. Last year, she continued, I wanted to take Lily and Noah to visit you for Christmas. Just for a few days. Derek said no, said his mother expected us at her house and disappointing her wasn't an option. When I suggested we split the holiday, spend Christmas Eve with you and Christmas Day with Diane, he called me selfish. Said I was trying to destroy his relationship with his mother. You haven't spent a holiday with me since Maggie died. I know. Rebecca's voice broke. I miss you so much, Dad. I miss having Sunday dinners at your place. I miss bringing the kids over to bake cookies with you. I miss having a life that's mine. What about friends? Do you still see anyone from before? She shook her head. Derek always has a reason why I can't meet up with them. He's too tired to watch the kids. We have plans he forgot to tell me about. My friends don't understand our lifestyle. Eventually, they stopped inviting me. I don't blame them. I thought about the vibrant young woman Rebecca had been before Derek. She'd had a whole community of friends, a weekly book club, a volunteer position at the animal shelter. All of that had been systematically stripped away until she was isolated, dependent, and convinced it was her own fault. There's something else. Rebecca set down her coffee cup, her hands shaking slightly. The kids. Lily is starting to act like him. What do you mean? She corrects me in front of Derek. Little things, like if I tell her to put away her toys and she says, actually, Mom, Dad said I could leave them out. She's learning that his word overrides mine, that I don't have real authority in my own home. And Noah? Noah just tries to disappear. He's 5 years old and he's already learned to make himself small and quiet when Derek is in a mood. Rebecca wiped her eyes. I'm terrified of what I'm teaching them, Dad. That this is what love looks like. That this is how families are supposed to work. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling between us. Outside my apartment window, I could see other residents of Maplewood Senior Living going about their Friday morning routines. Mrs. Henderson walking her small dog. Mr. Yao collecting his newspaper. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that in my small apartment, a daughter was finally admitting to her father that her marriage was a cage. I need to tell you something. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. Your mother saw this coming. Before she died, she tried to warn me about Derek. What did she say? She said Derek was the kind of man who needed control more than he needed love. That he'd chosen you because you were kind and trusting, and those were exactly the qualities he could exploit. I rubbed my face tiredly. I told her she was being paranoid. That Derek was just stressed about work, that all marriages had their rough patches. I didn't listen to her, Becca, and I'm so sorry. Mom always could read people. Rebecca smiled sadly. Remember how she knew Mrs. Patterson from your old neighborhood was stealing from the church donation box? Everyone thought she was crazy until they caught her on camera. Your mother had excellent instincts about character. And those instincts were screaming warnings about Derek that I ignored. It's not your fault, Dad. Maybe not entirely. But I'm your father, and I should have been paying closer attention. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out a business card I'd been carrying since Maggie's final days. After your mother died, I met with a family law attorney. Just to make sure all her affairs were in order, that you'd inherit everything properly. His name is Stephen Garcia, and he's very good at what he does. Rebecca stared at the card like it might bite her. You want me to divorce Derek? I want you to have options. There's a difference. I handed her the card. Stephen specializes in cases involving financial abuse and parental alienation. He's helped dozens of women in situations similar to yours. I can't afford a lawyer. Derek controls all our money. I can afford a lawyer. I've been living on my teacher's pension for 3 years, and I don't spend much. I have savings, and I have time. Most importantly, I have a daughter who deserves better than being locked outside in freezing weather while her husband celebrates Thanksgiving without her. Tears were streaming down Rebecca's face now. What about the kids? Derek will fight for custody. He'll say I'm unstable, that I abandoned them. Which is exactly why we need to be smart about this. I sat back down across from her. We're going to document everything. Every bruise on your fingers from last night. Every text message Derek sends. We're going to talk to your neighbor Mrs. Chen and ask if she'll testify about what she saw. We're going to build a case so solid that no judge in Minnesota will question that you and those children need to be away from him. He'll destroy me in court. You don't know how persuasive he can be. I'm a history teacher, Becca. I spent 40 years studying power and how it's used and abused. I know exactly how persuasive men like Derek can be. But I also know their weaknesses. What weaknesses? He's rich, he's charming, he has connections. He's arrogant. I smiled grimly. Men like Derek believe they're untouchable. They get sloppy because they're so convinced of their own superiority. And from what you've told me, Derek has been very sloppy. Financial control that can be documented. Witnesses to his treatment of you. A pattern of isolation that any competent attorney will recognize as abuse. Rebecca looked at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes for a long time. Hope, fragile and tentative, but real. What if I'm not strong enough to do this? You are. You're Maggie's daughter. You have her courage, even if Derek has spent years trying to convince you otherwise. I reached across and took her bandaged hand gently. And you're not doing this alone. I'm with you every step of the way. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Derek, this one angrier than the last. Your daughter needs to stop this childish behavior and come home immediately. We need to discuss her unacceptable actions. Rebecca read it over my shoulder and flinched. That's his reasonable voice. The one he uses before things get really bad. Then it's a good thing you're not there to hear what comes after the reasonable voice. I deleted the message. Monday morning, we call Stephen Garcia. Today, you rest and recover. Tomorrow, we start planning. What about the kids? I need to see them. Make sure they're okay. We'll figure that out. But Rebecca, you need to understand something. The moment you go back to that house without a legal strategy in place, Derek will make sure you never leave again. He'll paint last night as your breakdown, your instability. He'll use it as proof that you're unfit. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. So we do this right. We do this right. The way your mother would have wanted. Carefully, thoroughly, and with enough documentation that Derek Palmer won't be able to charm his way out of the consequences. Outside, the November sky was gray and heavy with the promise of more snow. Inside my small apartment, my daughter and I sat together planning the end of her marriage and the beginning of her freedom. It wasn't how I'd imagined spending the day after Thanksgiving. But then again, nothing about the last 24 hours had gone according to anyone's plan except perhaps fate's. Maggie, I thought, looking at the photograph of my late wife I kept on the mantel, I hope you can see this. I hope you know I'm finally doing what you asked me to do. I'm protecting our daughter. And if Derek Palmer thought locking Rebecca outside was the end of their story, he was about to learn a hard lesson about underestimating the quiet determination of a retired history teacher with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Rebecca had spent the weekend at my apartment, speaking to Lily and Noah only through brief, supervised phone calls that Derek monitored with barely concealed hostility. Each conversation left her hollow-eyed and shaking, but also more resolved. Stephen Garcia's office occupied the third floor of a granite building in downtown Minneapolis, the kind of place that radiated competence and discretion. Rebecca gripped my arm as we rode the elevator up, her knuckles white against the sleeve of my coat. The waiting room was tastefully decorated in blues and grays, with landscape paintings that probably cost more than my monthly pension. A receptionist with silver hair and kind eyes greeted us warmly. "Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Palmer? Mr. Garcia is ready for you." Stephen Garcia was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 50, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the focused energy of someone who took his work seriously. His handshake was firm, professional. "Please, sit down." He gestured to comfortable chairs arranged around a small conference table rather than across a desk. "I find this setup less adversarial." Rebecca sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap. I could see her fingers trembling slightly. "Ms. Palmer, your father called me Friday and gave me a brief overview of your situation. Before we discuss strategy, I need to hear the full story from you. Take your time. Nothing you say here will surprise me, and everything you say is protected by attorney-client privilege." Rebecca started with Thanksgiving night, her voice gaining strength as she described standing in the backyard for over an hour while Derek entertained his mother inside. Stephen took notes, his expression neutral but attentive. "How long were you outside before you contacted your father?" "At least an hour. Maybe longer. I tried the doors multiple times. Front, back, garage. Everything was locked." Rebecca's voice wavered. "The kitchen window faces the backyard. I could see Derek moving around inside. He knew I was out there." "Did he say anything to you through the window or door?" "No. He just ignored me completely. Like I didn't exist." Stephen wrote something down, then looked up. "Tell me about the financial situation in your marriage." Rebecca explained the account structure, the allowance system, the receipt requirements. Stephen's pen moved steadily across his legal pad, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions. "How long has this arrangement been in place? Do you have any access to joint account statements? Has he ever used money as punishment?" With each question, the picture became clearer. Derek had created a system of total financial dependence, documenting his control with the very receipts he demanded Rebecca save. "What about your teaching salary?" Stephen asked. "Where does that money go?" "Direct deposit into the joint account." "I don't have the login information. Derek says it's simpler if he manages everything centrally." "Simpler for him, certainly." Stephen set down his pen. "Ms. Palmer, what you're describing is textbook financial abuse. Minnesota law recognizes this as a form of domestic violence, even in the absence of physical harm." Rebecca looked startled. "But he never hit me." "Physical violence isn't required for abuse. Controlling someone's access to economic resources, monitoring their spending, preventing them from acquiring or maintaining employment, these are all recognized forms of abuse under Minnesota statute. I have a job though. I'm a teacher. But you have no access to the money you earn. That's economic exploitation." Stephen pulled out a thick folder. "I've handled dozens of cases with similar patterns. The courts take this very seriously, especially when children are involved." "The kids?" Rebecca's composure cracked. "Derek will fight for custody. He'll say I abandoned them." "Did you abandon them?" "No. I was locked out of my own house." "Exactly." Stephen leaned forward. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we document everything. The frostbite on your fingers from Thursday night. We'll need photographs and a doctor's statement. Second, we contact your neighbor, Mrs. Chin was it? If she witnessed any part of Thursday's events, her testimony will be valuable. Third, we file for an order for protection." Rebecca's eyes widened. "A restraining order?" "An OFP is different. It's a civil order that can include provisions for temporary custody, temporary use of the home, and temporary financial support. Given what happened Thursday, we have grounds to argue you're in danger. But Derek never threatened me physically. He locked you outside in 23-degree weather for over an hour. That's reckless endangerment at minimum. If you'd suffered serious frostbite or hypothermia, he could face criminal charges. This was moving faster than Rebecca had anticipated. I could see panic rising in her expression, the years of Derek's conditioning telling her she was overreacting, making too big a deal out of nothing. Becca. I put my hand over hers. Listen to what Stephen is saying. Miss Palmer, I understand this feels overwhelming. Stephen's voice was gentle but firm. You've spent years being told your feelings don't matter, that you're too sensitive, that you should be grateful. But the law doesn't care about Derek's justifications. The law cares about facts. And the facts are that your husband locked you out of your home in dangerous weather while your children were inside. What about Lily and Noah? How do I get them back? The OFP can include temporary custody provisions. We'll argue that the children witnessed their father lock their mother outside, which constitutes exposure to domestic abuse. Minnesota courts prioritize child safety. If we can demonstrate that Derek's behavior endangers you, we can argue it endangers them too. He's going to be furious. Rebecca's voice dropped to a whisper. You don't know what he's like when he's angry. Which is precisely why we need legal protection in place before you attempt to retrieve your belongings or see your children. Stephen pulled out several forms. This is the OFP petition. We'll file it today. There will be a hearing within 14 days where both you and Derek can present your cases. In the meantime, the temporary order will be in effect. What does that mean exactly? It means Derek cannot contact you except through attorneys. It means he cannot come within a certain distance of you. And it means we can request temporary custody and financial support while the divorce proceedings move forward. Divorce. Rebecca said the word like she was testing its weight. I'm really doing this. Only if you want to. Stephen's expression softened. Ms. Palmer, I won't lie to you. This process will be difficult. Derek will fight back. Men who exert this level of control don't relinquish it willingly. But you have several factors in your favor. You have documentation of financial abuse. You have a witness to Thursday's events. You have visible injuries. And you have a strong support system in your father. I glanced at Rebecca, seeing Maggie in the set of her jaw. My wife had been fierce when protecting those she loved. Our daughter had inherited that fierceness, even if Derek had spent years trying to bury it. What do we do first? Rebecca asked. First, we go to urgent care and document your injuries. Then we visit Mrs. Chen and ask if she'll provide a statement. Then we come back here and file the OFP petition. Stephen checked his watch. If we move efficiently, we can have everything filed by end of business today. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of activity. At the urgent care clinic, a physician's assistant photographed Rebecca's fingers and documented the frostbite damage. Superficial but consistent with prolonged cold exposure, she wrote in her report. Patient reports being locked outside for approximately 1 hour in below freezing temperatures. Mrs. Gloria Chen lived next door to Rebecca and Derek in a tidy ranch house with an immaculate garden. She answered the door in an apron, flour dusting her hands, and her face lit up when she saw Rebecca. Oh honey, I've been so worried. She pulled Rebecca into a hug. Come in, come in. Over tea at her kitchen table, Mrs. Chen explained what she'd witnessed Thanksgiving night. I was cleaning up after dinner when I heard someone moving around in their backyard. It was dark, but the motion sensor light kept going on. I looked out and saw Rebecca by the fence, and she wasn't wearing a coat. Did you speak to her? Stephen asked, his notepad ready. I knocked on my window and waved, trying to get her attention. She waved back but didn't come closer. I thought maybe she was just getting some air, you know? People need space during holidays. Mrs. Chen's expression grew troubled. But then I noticed she kept trying the back door. And I could see Derek inside through their kitchen window, clear as day. He walked right past that door several times. Did you see him acknowledge her presence? That's the thing. Mrs. Chen set down her teacup with a sharp click. He had to know she was out there. Their motion light was going on and off. But he never opened the door. Just kept moving around inside like everything was normal. How long did you observe this? At least 45 minutes. I was washing dishes, putting things away. I kept checking because it seemed so strange. When Rebecca was still out there after all that time, I almost went over. But I didn't want to interfere in a family matter. Mrs. Chen, would you be willing to provide a written statement about what you witnessed? Stephen asked. Absolutely. She reached across and squeezed Rebecca's hand. What Derek did was cruel. I've lived next to you for 5 years, honey. I've seen how he treats you. If I can help, I will. Back at Stephen's office, we assembled the petition. Rebecca's testimony, medical documentation, Mrs. Chen's witness statement, photographs of the locked doors in the backyard where Rebecca had been stranded. Stephen worked with practiced efficiency, organizing evidence into a narrative that was both legally compelling and emotionally devastating. This is strong. He reviewed the final document. Very strong. Judge Morrison handles most OFP cases in this district, and she has limited patience for this type of controlling behavior. When will Derek find out? Rebecca asked. He'll be served with the petition and temporary order within 24 hours of filing. He'll have the opportunity to respond at the hearing. Stephen looked at Rebecca seriously. I need you to understand something. The moment Derek is served, he will likely escalate. The temporary order will prevent him from contacting you directly, but he may try other methods. Mutual friends, family members, even showing up at your father's apartment. I'll be staying with Dad. Is that allowed? Absolutely. In fact, I recommend it. The temporary order can specify that you have exclusive use of the marital home, but given the circumstances, staying with your father is safer until we have permanent orders in place. What about my things? My clothes, my personal items? We can request a police escort to retrieve essential belongings once the temporary order is in effect. You'll have an officer present to ensure Derek doesn't interfere. By 5 o'clock, the petition was filed with Hennepin County Family Court. Stephen walked us to the elevator, his professional demeanor softening slightly. Ms. Palmer, you did the right thing coming here. What happened Thursday night could have ended much worse. Minnesota winters are deadly, and Derek's decision to lock you out showed shocking disregard for your safety. Thank you. Rebecca's voice was steady now, stronger than it had been that morning. For believing me. I deal in evidence, not belief. And you have plenty of evidence. Stephen shook my hand. Mr. Mitchell, your daughter is lucky to have you. In the elevator down, Rebecca leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Is this really happening? It's happening. And tomorrow, Derek gets a visit from a process server that's going to shatter his illusion of control. I'm scared, Dad. I know. But you're also brave. Braver than you realize. We drove back to my apartment through darkening streets, the city lights reflecting off fresh snow. Somewhere across town, Derek was probably sitting in the house on Oakwood Drive, confident that his wife would eventually come crawling back, apologetic and compliant. He had no idea that at this very moment, legal documents were being prepared that would fundamentally alter his life. Maggie would be proud of you, I told Rebecca as we pulled into the parking lot. You're doing what needs to be done. I wish she was here. She is. I touched the pendant I always wore, the one with Maggie's picture inside. She's always here. That night, Rebecca slept soundly for the first time in days. I sat in my recliner with a cup of tea, thinking about the road ahead. Derek Palmer had made a fatal mistake when he locked my daughter outside. He'd shown his hand, revealed his true nature in a way that even the courts couldn't ignore. Tomorrow, he would learn that actions have consequences. And by the end of the week, he would understand that the quiet schoolteacher he'd dismissed as irrelevant was actually the architect of his undoing. The process server arrived at 8:47, Oakwood Drive on Tuesday afternoon at 3:15. Rebecca and I knew the exact moment because Stephen Garcia called to confirm service had been completed. He wasn't happy. Stephen's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. Apparently he tried to refuse the documents, claimed they must be meant for someone else. The server informed him that denial doesn't negate service. How did he react? Rebecca asked, her voice tight. According to my contact, he went very still and quiet. Read through everything twice. Then asked if the server knew who had filed. Of course, she couldn't tell him anything beyond what's in the documents. Rebecca sat down heavily on my sofa. So now he knows. Now he knows. And Ms. Palmer, I want to reiterate what I told you yesterday. Do not answer any calls from numbers you don't recognize. Do not respond to emails. Do not engage with mutual friends who might be acting as intermediaries. All communication goes through me. We spent the rest of Tuesday afternoon in tense waiting. Rebecca tried to distract herself by helping me organize my kitchen cabinets, but every sound from the hallway made her jump. Every car door in the parking lot could be Derek coming to confront us, temporary restraining order or not. Wednesday morning brought the first volley. Stephen forwarded an email from Derek's attorney, a man named Richard Voss who apparently specialized in defending difficult divorces. My client categorically denies all allegations made in the order for protection petition. The events of Thanksgiving evening have been grossly mischaracterized. Ms. Palmer left the residence voluntarily after an argument and chose to remain outside rather than accept responsibility for her behavior. My client is deeply concerned about his wife's mental stability and her fitness as a parent. Rebecca read the email 3 times, her face growing paler with each pass. He's saying I'm crazy. That I chose to stand outside in the freezing cold. Of course he is. I kept my voice calm even as rage simmered in my chest. It's the only defense he has. Stephen said this would happen. Stephen's response was swift and surgical. He attached the medical report documenting Rebecca's frostbite, Mrs. Chen's witness statement, and photographs of the locked doors. His email was brief and devastating. Your client's version of events is contradicted by medical evidence, witness testimony, and physical documentation. Ms. Palmer's injuries are consistent with prolonged exposure to freezing temperatures. Mrs. Chen observed Ms. Palmer attempting to enter the residence multiple times while your client moved freely inside the home, making no attempt to assist his wife. We look forward to presenting this evidence at the hearing. Thursday brought a different strategy. Derek's mother Diane called my apartment at 7 in the morning. I answered before Rebecca could stop me. Harold, this is Diane Palmer. I think we need to talk about what's happening with Rebecca. Good morning, Diane. I kept my tone neutral. I'm not sure there's anything to discuss. Rebecca is safe, and she's exactly where she needs to be. Safe? Diane's voice rose. She's left her children with a man she's now accusing of abuse. What kind of mother does that? The kind whose husband locked her outside in sub-freezing temperatures. The kind who's following her attorney's advice. The kind who's protecting herself. Derek would never hurt Rebecca. You know that. He's been nothing but patient with her problems. Her problems. I felt my jaw tighten. You mean like the problem of being denied access to her own money? Or the problem of being isolated from her friends and family? Or perhaps the problem of being locked out of her house on Thanksgiving while you were inside enjoying dinner? There was a sharp intake of breath. You don't understand the full situation. I understand enough. Diane, I've known your son for 10 years. I've watched him systematically dismantle my daughter's confidence and independence. I've been too passive for too long, but that ends now. If you think the courts will side with her, you're mistaken. Derek has resources, connections. He'll fight this with everything he has. Good. Let him fight. We have evidence. She hung up without another word. Rebecca had been listening from the doorway. She's going to testify for him, isn't she? Almost certainly. Stephen warned us about this. Derek will bring character witnesses, people who'll paint him as a devoted father and husband. What if it works? What if the judge believes him? Then we appeal. But Becca, judges see cases like this constantly. They're trained to recognize patterns of abuse, especially financial control. Trust the process. Friday morning, Stephen called with news. The hearing has been scheduled for next Wednesday at 10. Judge Morrison's courtroom. I've prepared our presentation, and I need Ms. Palmer to come in Monday to review her testimony. What should I expect? Rebecca asked when Stephen put her on speaker. Derek's attorney will try to discredit you. He'll suggest you're emotionally unstable, that you're exaggerating or lying. He'll paint Derek as a concerned husband dealing with a difficult wife. You need to stay calm, answer questions directly, and don't let him bait you into emotional responses. That weekend was the longest of my life. Rebecca barely slept, rehearsing potential questions and second-guessing every decision. Saturday evening, as we sat in my small living room picking a takeout neither of us really wanted, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mommy, why aren't you coming home? Daddy says you don't want to see us anymore. Lily misses you. Please come back." Rebecca's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "That's Derek. He's using Lily's phone to send that. Don't respond." I took the phone from her and forwarded the message to Stephen. This is exactly the kind of manipulation he warned us about. But what if Lily really did write that? What if she thinks I abandoned her? She's 8 years old, Becca. She doesn't understand what's happening, and that's not your fault. It's Derek's fault for putting her in the middle of this. 10 minutes later, Stephen called. This message is a clear violation of the temporary order. Derek is prohibited from contacting Ms. Palmer through any means, including through the children. I'm documenting this and will bring it to the judge's attention Wednesday. Sunday afternoon, Father Thomas O'Brien from St. Catherine's called. Rebecca had mentioned she sometimes attended Mass there, though Derek had gradually discouraged even that small independence. "Rebecca, I heard you might be going through a difficult time. I wanted you to know the parish is here if you need support." "Thank you, Father." Rebecca's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm not sure what people have heard. Only that you're separated from Derek and staying with your father." Father Thomas paused. "Rebecca, in my 40 years as a priest, I've counseled many couples. I've seen many kinds of marriages. What I want you to know is that leaving a situation where you're not safe, physically or emotionally, is not a sin. It's self-preservation. Derek's family goes to St. Catherine's too. They'll tell you I'm overreacting, that I'm breaking up my family. I've known the Palmer family for many years." Father Thomas chose his words carefully. "I've also known you. I've watched you become smaller and quieter over the years you've been married. I've seen the light dim in your eyes. Whatever is happening between you and Derek, I trust you have good reasons for the choices you're making." After the call ended, Rebecca wept for the first time since Thanksgiving night. Not from fear or grief, but from the relief of being believed, of having someone acknowledge that her suffering was real. Monday morning, we met with Stephen to prepare for Wednesday's hearing. He'd organized our evidence into a presentation that was methodical and damning. Photographs of Rebecca's frostbitten fingers. Medical documentation. Mrs. Chen's statement. Screenshots of Derek's text violations. Bank statements showing Rebecca's complete lack of financial access. The judge will ask you direct questions. Stephen looked at Rebecca seriously. Answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate unless I signal you to. Don't let Voss provoke you. He'll try to make you angry or emotional. What kind of questions? He'll ask about your marriage. About Thanksgiving night. About your relationship with the children. He'll ask why you haven't tried to see Lily and Noah since you left. Rebecca's face crumpled. I want to see them so badly. Every moment away from them is torture. Which is exactly what we'll tell the judge. Stephen's expression softened. You're following legal advice. You're protecting yourself so you can be there for your children long term. That's not abandonment. That's strategy. What will Derek say? He'll claim you left voluntarily. That you're unstable. That he's the stable parent and the children should remain with him. He'll probably bring his mother to testify about what a devoted father he is. Will anyone testify for me besides Mrs. Chen? Your father will testify about what he witnessed Thursday night. About your condition when he picked you up. We also have your doctor's statement and the urgent care documentation. Tuesday evening, Rebecca stood at my apartment window watching snow fall over Minneapolis. Tomorrow was the hearing that would determine custody of her children and the immediate future of her marriage. What if I lose? She didn't turn around. What if the judge gives Derek primary custody? Then we appeal and continue fighting. But Rebecca, you have to believe in the strength of your case. We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have documentation of abuse. He's going to look so put together in court. So rational and calm. She finally turned to face me. And I'm going to look like exactly what he says I am. An emotional mess who overreacted to one argument. You're going to look like a woman who survived something terrible and found the courage to fight back. I crossed to her and put my hands on her shoulders. Your mother survived 30 years in the nursing profession seeing the worst of what people do to each other. She never lost her faith in justice. Neither will we. That night, I lay awake long after Rebecca had finally fallen into restless sleep on the pull-out sofa. I thought about Maggie and the warning she tried to give me about Derek. I thought about the 10 years I'd watched my daughter diminish herself to keep her husband happy. I thought about Lily and Noah, learning from their father's example that love meant control and that kindness was weakness. Wednesday would be the first real battle in a war I suspected would last months. Derek had resources and connections and a lifetime of practice manipulating people into seeing what he wanted them to see. But we had something he didn't expect. We had the truth, documented and witnessed and undeniable. At 6 Wednesday morning, I woke Rebecca with coffee and toast she couldn't eat. Stephen had instructed us to arrive at the courthouse by 9:30. Rebecca dressed carefully in a navy suit that made her look professional and composed, nothing like the broken woman Derek would try to portray. How do I look? She turned from the mirror. Like your mother. Strong, dignified, and ready to fight for what matters. We drove through morning traffic to the Hennepin County Courthouse, an imposing building of stone and glass where justice was supposed to be blind and fair. Stephen met us in the hallway outside Judge Morrison's courtroom, his briefcase heavy with evidence. Derek is already here with his attorney and his mother. Stephen kept his voice low. Don't make eye contact. Don't react to anything they say or do. Let me handle everything. Through the courtroom doors, I could see Derek Palmer for the first time since Thanksgiving. He sat at the defendant's table in an expensive suit, every inch the successful businessman, his expression grave and concerned. Diane sat in the gallery behind him, her face set in lines of righteous indignation. They looked so normal, so respectable. But I'd learned what Maggie had always known. The most dangerous people rarely looked like monsters. They looked like Derek Palmer, well-dressed and plausible, ready to convince a judge that locking his wife outside in freezing weather was somehow her fault, not his. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. Judge Morrison entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie that could be told in family court. Rebecca gripped my hand as we stood. This was it. The moment that would determine whether justice would prevail or whether Derek's careful facade would hold long enough to let him keep control. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison. The hearing was about to begin. Judge Morrison's courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that gave everything a harsh, unforgiving quality. Rebecca sat beside Stephen at the petitioner's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the aisle, Derek maintained his expression of wounded dignity, occasionally whispering to Richard Voss. The judge reviewed the petition in silence, her reading glasses perched on her nose. When she finally looked up, Her gaze moved between Rebecca and Derek with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd presided over hundreds of these hearings. This is a petition for an order for protection with requests for temporary custody and exclusive use of the marital residence. Mr. Voss, I've read your client's response. Does he wish to make an opening statement? Richard Voss stood, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, my client is a devoted husband and father who's been blindsided by these allegations. What occurred on Thanksgiving was a regrettable misunderstanding that's been distorted beyond recognition. Ms. Palmer left the residence voluntarily during a disagreement and has since refused all attempts at reconciliation. Mr. Garcia? Judge Morrison turned to Stephen. Your Honor, we have medical documentation, witness testimony, and photographic evidence that directly contradicts Mr. Voss's characterization. Ms. Palmer was locked out of her home for over an hour in 23-degree weather, resulting in frostbite injuries. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was reckless endangerment. The judge made a note. Ms. Palmer, please approach the witness stand. Rebecca stood on shaking legs. I watched her walk across the courtroom, saw her place her hand on the Bible, heard her swear to tell the truth. She looked small in the witness box, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. Stephen began with gentle questions, establishing timeline and context. Rebecca's voice was steady as she described Thanksgiving dinner preparations, Derek's refusal to invite me, the argument that followed. What happened after the argument? Stephen asked. Derek told me if I wanted my father there so badly, I could wait outside for him. Then he walked to the front door and held it open. When I didn't move immediately, he said I had 10 seconds to decide. Did you leave voluntarily? I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. Rebecca's voice caught. When Derek uses that tone, it's not a suggestion. It's a command. What happened after you went outside? I heard the door lock behind me. I tried the back door, the garage, even knocked on the kitchen window. Derek walked past several times. He saw me. He just wouldn't let me back in. Stephen introduced the medical records, the photographs of her fingers, Mrs. Chen's statement. Judge Morrison examined each piece of evidence carefully, her expression giving nothing away. Then it was Voss's turn. He approached Rebecca with the bearing of someone about to expose a liar. Ms. Palmer, you say my client locked you out. But you chose to stay outside for over an hour rather than simply apologize and ask to come back in. Doesn't that suggest this was about pride rather than abuse? I tried every door multiple times. Rebecca's voice remained steady. I wasn't staying outside by choice. You could have called the police. And said what? That my husband and I had an argument? By the time I realized he wasn't going to let me in, I'd been outside long enough that I was afraid my judgment was impaired from the cold. Voss paced. You've made serious allegations about financial control. But isn't it true that you and your husband made a mutual decision about account management to simplify household budgeting? Derek made that decision. I was told it was simpler if he handled everything. But you never objected until now. You never tried to access the accounts or insist on equal control. Because every time I questioned his decisions, he made it clear that I was being difficult, that I didn't understand finances the way he did. Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. He convinced me I wasn't capable of managing money. The testimony continued for another hour. Derek took the stand, presenting himself as a patient man dealing with an increasingly unstable wife. He claimed Rebecca had been depressed since her mother's death, that he'd encouraged her to seek therapy, that Thanksgiving's incident was the result of her refusing to take responsibility for her behavior. Diane Palmer testified next, painting her son as devoted and long-suffering. She's never appreciated everything Derek does for her and those children. He works constantly to provide them with a beautiful home and a comfortable life, and this is how she repays him. Then Mrs. Chen took the stand. She was nervous but firm in her recollection. I saw Rebecca trying those doors repeatedly. I saw Derek inside, moving around the kitchen. He had to know she was out there, but he never opened the door. Not once. When Mrs. Chen stepped down, Judge Morrison removed her glasses and addressed both attorneys. I've heard enough testimony. I'm ready to issue my ruling on the temporary order. The courtroom went silent. Rebecca gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Based on the evidence presented, including medical documentation and credible witness testimony, I find that Ms. Palmer has demonstrated sufficient grounds for an order for protection. Judge Morrison's voice was crisp, decisive. Mr. Palmer's actions on Thanksgiving evening showed reckless disregard for his wife's safety. Whether he intended to cause harm is irrelevant. He did cause harm, and that harm is documented. Derek's face went pale. Diane made a small sound of protest. The temporary order will remain in effect pending final hearing. Ms. Palmer is granted temporary custody of the minor children, with supervised visitation from Mr. Palmer to be arranged through the court. Ms. Palmer is also granted temporary exclusive use of the marital residence. Mr. Palmer, you have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings from the home. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Voss stood quickly. My client is being punished for a simple misunderstanding. Your Honor, if I may. Derek's voice, the first time he'd spoken directly. This is a terrible mistake. Mr. Palmer, the evidence speaks clearly. You locked your wife outside in dangerous weather. You controlled her access to marital funds. You violated the temporary order by contacting her through your daughter's phone. Judge Morrison's tone hardened. These are not the actions of a loving husband. They're the actions of someone who views his wife as property to be managed. Additionally, I'm ordering a full financial accounting of all marital assets. Mr. Palmer, you will provide complete access to all bank statements, investment accounts, and financial records within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. Rebecca collapsed against Stephen's shoulder, tears streaming down her face. Across the aisle, Derek sat frozen, the mask finally slipping to reveal rage and disbelief beneath. We walked out of the courthouse into December sunshine. Rebecca stood on the steps, breathing deeply, looking up at the sky like a prisoner seeing daylight after years of confinement. When can I see the kids? She asked Stephen. I'll coordinate with the court to arrange retrieval of the children from school today. You'll have them back this afternoon. Stephen smiled. You did well in there, Ms. Palmer. Very well. That evening, Rebecca sat in her own living room on Oakwood Drive with Lily and Noah curled against her on either side. They'd cried when she picked them up from school, confused and frightened by the upheaval. But now, as she read them stories and stroked their hair, they were beginning to relax. I stood in the kitchen making hot chocolate, watching my daughter reclaim her home and her children. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Chen's house next door, her lights warm and welcoming. My phone buzzed. A text from Stephen. Derek's attorney has already filed for emergency custody hearing. They're not giving up. Be prepared for a long fight. I looked at Rebecca and the children, at the beginning of their healing. Let Derek fight. Let him hire the best attorneys money could buy. We had something more powerful than money or connections. We had the truth, and we had each other. Maggie, I thought, looking at my daughter's face as she laughed at something Noah said, we did it. We got her out. The road ahead would be difficult. Derek would fight the divorce with everything he had. There would be more hearings, more testimony, more attempts to paint Rebecca as unstable or unfit. But tonight, my daughter was safe. Her children were with her. And for the first time in 10 years, she was free. Outside, snow began to fall over Minneapolis, covering everything in clean white. Inside, Rebecca closed the storybook and hugged her children close, no longer afraid of locked doors or frozen nights or a man who'd mistaken cruelty for love. Justice had been served. And tomorrow, we'd start building the life Rebecca deserved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.